is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to Global Business Europe, live from CGTN in London. I'm Paul Barber.
And I'm Juliet Mann. Our top stories. A train crash killed dozens in Taiwan. The express service came off the tracks inside a tunnel.
UK opposition grows against vaccine passports as dangerous and discriminatory.
Spain trials a 4-day work week using EU funding for better work-life balance.
And in Mexico, the beloved Lucha Libre wrestlers are doing their best to make sure everyone is keeping COVID safe. And we start in Taiwan, where at least 50 people have been killed and dozens more injured after a train derailed. It had been travelling from Taipei. CGTN's Jemima Walker reports.
This is the wreckage of the busy passenger train, crumpled at the mouth of a tunnel. It reportedly crashed into a maintenance vehicle which had slipped onto the tracks.
The trailer of the construction vehicle slid off the road and crashed into the train. Now the whole head of the train is damaged.
Almost 500 people were on board when the accident happened. A public holiday meant it was particularly busy, with passengers standing in carriages. Many of them were travelling for the annual Tomb Sweeping Festival, where people pay their respects to relatives who've died. There are still people trapped inside, says this passenger, as he manages to walk away. Rescuers say they believe they've now found all survivors, but will continue to comb through the debris. Many people in the back carriages walked away unscathed, but most of those who died or were injured were in the front 4 cars. The position of the carriages in the tunnel meant it took hours to free or find people.
Because there was no space on the sides in the tunnel, we had to climb onto the carriage roof to walk out. All of a sudden, I just fell from my seat to the ground. I hit my head and it was bleeding.
Rescuers carried body bags across the tracks. Around 66 survivors are being treated in nearby hospitals. Others look on and pray for the victims of Taiwan's worst rail accident in decades. Jemima Walker, CGTN.
CGTN's Sue Newton has been at the scene and sent us this update.
There are 8 carriages and 4 of them are currently outside the tunnel, which is right now behind me. The tunnel behind me is number 1 carriage, but the carriage which damaged the most were number 7 and number 8. And it was quite dark inside since the power was cut off, during the rescue operation. And now the casualties occurred mostly in the 4 part, which is the number 7 and number 8 carriage. And many people were trapped during the rescue, but now, according to local staff, there's an ambulance coming, so we have to move forward a bit. Yes, currently there are still many ambulances coming in and coming out from the accident site, since it's over 10 hours since the accident. And according to local staff, all the people survivors were already rescued from the train and were sent to around 6 hospitals in Hualien, but there are also maybe passengers that were killed, some of them were still kept in the train, and the staff here are trying to take them out. So this is the current situation of the rescue operation.
More than 70 British lawmakers are opposing so-called vaccine passports. The government is considering them to help open the economy as it lifts COVID restrictions. But a cross-party group of MPs is calling the proposal divisive and discriminatory. Our correspondent Guy Henderson is live in London. So, Guy, how could this affect the government's plans to lift lockdown measures?
Well, Paul, there have been more than 125,000 COVID-linked deaths in the UK since the start of the pandemic. And many of those lost lives are being remembered here at what is a new national COVID memorial wall on the banks of the River Thames in central London. But as much as there is great sadness here, there is also a great deal of hope at the moment emerging from that sadness that the worst may really be behind the UK now, largely due to what has been a very rapid rollout of its vaccine programme, which has many of those people who oppose the idea of some sort of immunity certificate, as the government prefers to call it, because they say it has those people, those opponents, asking, well, do we really need to have that kind of controversial system in place if so many of the most vulnerable people across the United Kingdom have already been vaccinated? There is a third wave of the coronavirus affecting many parts of Europe at the moment. That hasn't hit the UK yet, although the latest statistics released on Friday by the Office of National Statistics suggests that the number of people contracting the coronavirus in England, at least at the moment, may have stopped shrinking. But a big question is, if that wave does start to affect parts of the UK, how dangerous will that really be if so many people now have a decent level or some level of immunity? Could it be, for example, the case that the virus could circulate amongst younger, healthier sections of the population, and that therefore you wouldn't see, accompanying that rise in cases, a rise in the number of hospitalisations and deaths? Now, the Chief Medical Officer of Britain, Chris Whitty, has said that he thinks that some measures may have to stay in place for up to 2 years. But at the moment, it does look as though the UK has no plans to slow down its rate of easing those lockdowns.
Scotland's stay-at-home order finally came to an end on Friday. In England, people are already allowed to meet in groups of 6 outdoors. But as Easter approaches, authorities are urging caution. Much remains shut, including London Zoo, leaving animals to take part in their annual egg hunt without the usual audience. Crowds may soon return, though, with reports that spectators who can prove immunity may be allowed to attend next month's FA Cup football final at Wembley Stadium. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's expected to announce more details of plans for so-called immunity passports on Monday, amid signs of growing unease amongst many MPs who worry they would entrench the extraordinary infringement on civil liberties imposed over the last year and divide society. There's pressure on the government from both sides, though. West End theatres are amongst those who'll receive a new round of funding that may keep them afloat for now. When such support winds down, though, they'll need to find a way to bring back audiences safely.
Take a few steps back if you have to.
The immunity passport plan looks more likely as a way to get international travel going again at some point. On Friday, though, 4 more countries, Pakistan, Kenya, Bangladesh and the Philippines, were added to England's travel red list. A sense of hope persists here that the UK might well have seen the last of lockdowns. Ahead, though, a clearer sense than ever too, perhaps, of what that phrase new normal might really have to mean.
Well, Guy, it's been reported that foreign holiday destinations for Britons will be ranked under a traffic light system. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so at the moment across the UK, foreign holidays for people living in the UK are banned. But both the Times and the Sun newspaper are reporting that the government may be planning to put in place a system where that could change over time, where essentially you would have all countries starting on the red list, so holidays can't happen to those places, but that as vaccination uptake in individual countries increased, as the rate of infection came down, individual countries would then be able to potentially move into the amber zone and eventually the green zone in that traffic light system, which might even reportedly mean quarantineless travel between the UK for holidays and countries that are on that green list. Now, we may hear more from Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, on Monday about this. Questions, of course, firstly, when might that system be in place? And secondly, of course, at the moment, presumably a very limited number of countries that would make it, into even the amber zone, let alone the green zone. So still a lot of questions. That, of course, is not also something we've been able to confirm independently. These are newspaper reports. But if it is confirmed, that, of course, would provide some hope both to the beleaguered travel industry and for people in the UK who are desperate, finally, to get out and see a bit of the world again.
Yes, indeed. Guy Henderson live in central London. Many thanks.
Well, Guto Hari is a former spokesperson for Prime Minister Boris Johnson when he was Mayor of London. I asked him why there's so much opposition to the concept of vaccine passports in Parliament.
I understand the anxiety that, a big chunk of the Conservative Party are essentially libertarian. They don't think the state should be intervening in the lives of people more than is absolutely necessary. And so the last year has been really tough. And just as we come out of the worst parts of lockdown, the last thing they want to see is the suggestion that you can't go to the theatre or the cinema or a restaurant or a pub without showing some sort of proof of identity and proof of certain medical treatment, if you think of having the vaccine as that. So it is an understandable concern for them. The other side of the argument, of course, is some would say it's unavoidable. And if we are to start getting at least most of the country out of lockdown sooner, then for the confidence of others to enable the economy to get going again, that kind of thing will boost confidence. And therefore, it's unavoidable, indeed desirable.
The government has, as you infer there, sidestepped objections to some restrictions that have been put in place over the pandemic. Why are vaccine passports, do you think, garnering so much attention and so much opposition?
I think in the end, it's the inevitability. It's the case for them on a practical level is so overwhelming. You can imagine airlines thinking, do we not allow anyone to travel until everyone is vaccinated, or do we start saying you can start traveling with us now if you can prove that you are safe from having the vaccine? And you can see the case for that in pubs, in restaurants, in cinemas. So I think the fear in the government is if they don't control and own this, it will happen anyway by default, and they will be seen to be irrelevant. So the reality on the ground, whether people like it or not, agree with it or not, is there will be some form of distinction drawn, even if you think that's discrimination, between people who can prove that they've had the vaccine and are therefore not a threat to themselves or others, and people who can't.
Well, there's a review going on, isn't there, looking at how it might help open up the economy. And Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has also said vaccine passports are likely to form a part of the future of international travel. You've mentioned the Conservative Party, but what about the general public? Do people really want more rules?
I don't think they do, but if you've had the vaccine, I think, most people will want to get on with life and not have to wait until literally everybody has been vaccinated before we can all step out together. So some would call that discriminatory behaviour and all that. It's particularly harsh on the young because they're the bottom of the queue, and yet they're not for vaccines, and yet they're not really, that susceptible, most of them, to this. But if you want to get the economy going again and actually being able to prove that you are safe walking into a restaurant or a pub or an office or a plane, is going to speed that up, at least for a growing part of the population, more than 30 million now, then the argument for is pretty compelling.
Meanwhile, Britain's medicines regulator says it's identified 30 cases of rare blood clot events after the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine. That's 25 more than the agency previously reported. It says the count was updated as part of a rolling review into UK vaccines. Some countries, including Germany, France and Canada, are restricting use of the jab, while others have resumed inoculations as investigations continue. The World Health Organization, along with UK and EU regulators, say the jab is safe to use and the benefits outweigh the risks.
It's Europe's second Easter holiday weekend under pandemic restrictions. France is about to enter another full lockdown, and Brussels is under another set of tighter rules. And so Belgian police have broken up a prank festival. Stuart Smith explains.
It wasn't long before La Boum became La Bust as police moved in to disperse illegally large crowds. An afternoon of sun and beer became an evening of violence as projectiles rained down on police and water rained down on revellers. The Mayor of Brussels says he wants people to enjoy the parks and the fresh air, but that the event went way beyond what was acceptable. On Twitter, the Prime Minister called the actions totally unacceptable, saying nothing can justify such behaviour, certainly not at a time when hospitals are filling up and everyone in the healthcare sector is scrambling day and night to find beds and provide vital care. But the April 1st fiesta may not be the last. A repeat is planned for tonight, but this one's no joke. Organisers say it's a form of civil disobedience to demand the right to meet. Belgium's latest restrictions still allow people to see up to 4 others outside, and non-essential businesses can remain open, with entry by appointment only. But in neighbouring France, 150,000 businesses are being forced to close as it enters the first day of its 3rd nationwide lockdown. The cost of keeping those businesses alive is $13 billion a month. France's finance minister says that's worth it.
This costs less than a wave of bankruptcy, than a tsunami of layoffs, than the necessity to later rebuild companies and businesses. And so this is a really strategic choice. This is what will allow us to bounce back strongly as soon as the health restrictions are lifted.
For Europe, the long-term plan to stop the cycle of lockdowns is vaccination. And late last evening, EU ambassadors agreed on a plan to distribute 10 million extra doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. There had been disagreement on whether to distribute the extra doses by population size or whether to prioritise countries in greater need. In the end, a compromise: 7 million doses to countries based on their population, 3 million doses donated to Bulgaria, Croatia, Estonia, Latvia and Slovakia. That, says the Prime Minister of Portugal, will ensure every country has enough doses to vaccinate at least 45% of their population by the end of June. The jury's out on whether that will be enough to prevent lockdown number 4. Stuart Smith, CGTN, Brussels.
You're watching CGTN. Still to come. United on the right. Political allies from Hungary, Poland and Italy forge a populist partnership that could shake up the European Parliament.
Search CGTN Europe wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Agenda podcast. The Agenda with me, Stephen Cole, always gets to the heart of the story. Just subscribe today and listen now.
Covering the world from 4 continents. A new horizon. Teams in Beijing, Washington, D.C., Nairobi, and London. Who connect, interact, and inquire to bring you the stories that matter to all. The Link, only on CGTN.
Don't forget you can sign up to our daily newsletter. We bring you all the top business headlines straight to your inbox. So sign up for free at this address. CGTN. See the difference.
It's a question we've been waiting almost 5 years to answer. It affects millions of people and billions worth of business. Now's the time to answer, what does Brexit mean? CGTN Europe has asked people across Europe. We've analysed the discussion on social media and we've looked at the facts and figures. Are you one of those who's already feeling the change? Did you take part in the debate on social media? Join us throughout the week on television and online to mark 100 days since the UK reset its relationship with the EU. And have your say as part of our live and interactive show on Facebook from 12 GMT on Sunday the 11th of April. Welcome back. Remember, CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, as well as CGTN.com and the CGTN app. Spain could become the world's first country to adopt a 4-day working week, with the government set to launch a nationwide trial later this year. Supporters believe the plan will boost employees' productivity, but not everyone's on board. Rahul Pathak reports from Madrid.
Over 300 kilometres south of Madrid, in the heart of Andalusia, one company has made a huge impact on how people could work in the future. Back in 2020, Del Sol Software was the first business in Spain to trial a 4-day week. They reduced the hours of their 190 employees, but not their salary. Now the government plans to trial this employment model at a national level.
Our assessment was really positive. We increased the turnover by 30% compared with 2019. And regarding the benefits it had for our workers, we saw a huge increase in their engagement and commitment. We noticed that teamwork and the working environment also improved. We feel, even to this day, it was a really positive experience all around.
The socialist ruling coalition plans to invest $60 million of its EU COVID recovery fund in 200 small-sized companies. They will reduce the working week to 32 hours. The government will subsidise the shortfall, reducing its financial commitment on a sliding scale over 3 years. Now, the thinking behind this scheme is that happier employees should result in an increase in productivity. It'll also promote better mental health and work-life balance, plus less people actually physically going to work should help in the battle against climate change. Not everyone is in agreement. Critics have argued that Spain is using EU funds to allow people to work less, and business leaders have also questioned the timing of the trial. The country is still battling a pandemic with record debt and huge unemployment.
It is naive to think that this is a solution for a country like Spain that is still working with a decades-old structure and has huge structural unemployment. You have to bear in mind the importance of the service sector and the massive number of jobs here that need an intensive labour force. I think it would be really difficult for this model to have any impact on our unemployment.
The aim is to launch this trial by autumn, although specific details are yet to be decided. Many economists, both in Spain and beyond, will be watching with real interest to see how it unfolds. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
The US economy has seen a boost in employment, with more than 900,000 jobs created last month. It's the biggest gain since August, although overall employment is lower than before the pandemic. The reopening of hospitality, construction sites and schools has been a big factor. Asian markets have responded to Thursday's record-breaking day on Wall Street. With trade subdued because of holidays, Tokyo's Nikkei and Hong Kong's Hang Seng led a modest rally in the wake of Joe Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure spending plan. Nike has won a lawsuit to temporarily halt sales of the so-called Satan shoes. They were designed by a Brooklyn art company in collaboration with US rapper Lil Nas X. The trainers contain a drop of real human blood in the soles and feature the sportswear giant's famous logo. UK universities are celebrating. The government has released $345 million to remain in Horizon Europe. That's the European Union's funding programme for research and innovation. Britain stayed in the scheme as part of its trade deal with the EU, but university leaders had feared the government would seek to fund it from existing research budgets.
It is World Autism Awareness Day, with this year's focus on support in the workplace. Studies show there are high levels of unemployment among autistic adults, and those who do have jobs face discrimination at work on a daily basis. Hiren Shukla is the Global Director of the Neurodiversity Programme at EY Global, and he joins me now. Thanks for coming on the programme. Why is there this stark employment gap, do you think, for neurodiverse people?
I think, and thank you for having me today. As an employer and an ally of neurodivergent individuals, I think there's a gap in understanding, awareness, and application, and that results in this amazing untapped workforce that is available, frankly, across industry, sector, and rank.
You talk about that untapped sector. I mean, what are some of the strengths that neurodiverse and people with autism bring to the workforce?
Yeah, neurodivergent individuals and those who are autistic bring creativity, innovation, skills that could apply to marketing, finance, the technology sector. And we find that this power of thinking differently really brings this multidimensional element that organizations are looking for, especially today, to be more agile and resilient.
You talk about being agile, more resilient. So how might the move away from office-based work, that culture, because of the pandemic, how might that suit autistic people looking to get into the workplace more?
You know, that's a great question. Our experience at EY has been, moving to a remote environment has actually opened up the job market, particularly for autistic individuals, those that are neurodivergent at large, because it's allowing us to now access them where they are, as opposed to just where the jobs are. The other beautiful part about this is the neurodivergent team members that we are lucky enough to hire are extremely comfortable with technology, and therefore using platforms as we're using today, Zoom and such, really allow us to tap into this diverse workforce and not have to add increased stress, anxiety from office stimuli or a commute to the office.
So how do you change the mindset? What is it, do you think, that's going to drive change so that hiring people with autism is seen less by businesses as an act of corporate social responsibility and more as a beneficial profit-related decision?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. I think the paradigm shift in perception from the deficit-based model, what do these individuals need to be successful, which is a component of this, really to a strengths-based model. What is in that spiky profile? What are those high points that these individuals have natural acumen, aptitude, and interest? And I think that increased awareness and literally case studies, as we've done at EY, that we would share with others that say, this isn't a hypothetical use case. This is something really to be scaled within your organizations globally.
Well, Hiren Shukla, pleasure talking to you. Hiren Shukla at the EY Global Diversity Programme. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, later on in the show, we'll take you to an art exhibition in Beijing to see how painting and music is helping autistic children express themselves. Stay tuned.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has held talks with right-wing counterparts from Poland and Italy to lay the groundwork for a new European political grouping. It comes after his ruling Fidesz party quit the European People's Party last month, leaving it without a voice in Europe's parliament. Penelope Lurch reports from Budapest.
These are the faces of what Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban hopes will become a European resistance. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki and Matteo Salvini, leader of Italy's League Party. The political allies gathered in Budapest on Thursday to try and lay groundwork for a new European political grouping, united under the right wing.
We also say no to censorship, the European empire of Brussels, communism, illegal migration and anti-Semitism. It is clear that we share these ideas and values. We will continue the work we just started today. The organizing work has started.
It comes exactly 2 weeks after Orban's Fidesz party finalised its break from its centre-right family within the European Parliament, the European People's Party. The split came after years of arguments around expelling the Hungarian group, accused of damaging the rule of law and engaging in anti-Brussels rhetoric. Prime Minister Orban claims the EPP has visibly committed itself to the left and that no one is representing traditional Christian values. Italy's group is the largest member party of the Identity and Democracy Group in the European Parliament. It was noted in the talks if the group was to join forces with the European Conservatives and Reformists, which contains Poland's ruling party, it could create the second largest bloc after the EPP.
Promujemy solidarność.
We want to promote solidarity, but not at the expense of weaker nations. Europe should not dictate the stronger ones, those who are bigger or stronger today. European solidarity should be based on common values.
Viktor Orban says the politicians will meet again next month potentially in Warsaw. Penelope Leash, CGTN, Budapest.
A regional office of Spain's leftist Podemos party has been struck by a firebomb. The attack took place in Cartagena, in the country's southeast. Podemos has described it as street terrorism of the far right. According to a party spokesman, this is the 6th time the party building has been hit by vandalism. Police say no arrests have been made yet.
But there was an arrest made somewhere else, in the Spanish city of Barcelona, where British free climber George King has scaled one of Europe's tallest skyscrapers. The 21-year-old climbed the 116-metre Melia Barcelona Sky Hotel using nothing but his own strength to get him to the top. It took around 20 minutes. Now, King, who also free climbed the Shard building in London in 2019, was arrested as soon as both feet were back on the ground. He's expected to face a fine.
Still ahead here on CGTN, a UK study finds nearly 1 in 7 people who tested positive for COVID-19 continue to have symptoms for at least 12 weeks.
More than 100,000 people in Italy have now died from COVID-19.
The vaccination programme offers some hope for the future, but intensive care units are near capacity.
The Spanish government is hoping to vaccinate over 1 million people by next month.
Living in Germany are struggling with their mental health.
Hungary is supplementing the EU's vaccine rollout, buying doses from Russia and China to speed up the process.
4 million people have tested positive in France.
After a grim winter, the promise of a spring bloom that could mean freedom for millions.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
We can try out the wild and crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very busy when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
The agreement is signed. But what is the real deal now the UK has left the EU? For trade, for business, for the city, for ordinary people. Make sense of Brexit with CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Paul Barber and me, Juliette Mann. Our top stories. A train crash kills dozens in Taiwan. The express service came off the tracks inside a tunnel. UK opposition grows against vaccine passports as dangerous and discriminatory. And Spain trials a 4-day working week using EU funding for better work-life balance.
A court in Moscow has fined Twitter for failing to remove content, some of which called for protests over the jailing of opposition figure Alexei Navalny. Russia's internet watchdog has threatened to shut down social media companies if they refuse to comply with demands. Julia Chapman reports.
Russian authorities sued an array of social media sites last month. In January, they ordered them to take down posts by users calling for protests in the wake of the arrest and jailing of Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny. The crackdown comes after a new law was introduced last year allowing for fines to be issued against social media companies that didn't comply with regulators' orders to take down banned content. For the most part, Twitter has been cooperating cooperative, removing content in the instances of abuse or illegal behavior. But when it comes to social media posts, there have been disputes with the regulators. Russian officials say they have slowed down Twitter in an effort to force compliance. Twitter has previously expressed concern over Russia's actions and the impact they could have on freedom of speech in the country. Domestic providers, including Odnoklassniki and Vkontakte, have also been issued fines. Next week, the court will hear similar allegations against TikTok and Telegram. Julia Chapman, CGTN, Moscow.
The United States and Iran have agreed to indirect talks on efforts to revive the 2015 nuclear agreement. Senior representatives from the Biden administration, along with Iranian, European, Russian and Chinese partners, will meet in Vienna on Tuesday. Washington says there will be no direct discussions with Tehran officials, but says it's open to them. President Biden says he wants to return to the deal which Donald Trump pulled out of in 2018. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has narrowly survived a vote of no confidence, but his role remains under threat. Parliament has adopted a formal motion of disapproval against him, saying Rutte had not told the truth during recent talks to form a new government. Niger has seen its first democratic transfer of power since independence in 1960. Mohamed Bazoum was sworn in as president just days after the government said it foiled an attempted coup by sections in the military. Since Bazoum's election in February, the West African nation has faced an increase in attacks by militant groups. Indian cricketing great Sachin Tendulkar has been admitted to hospital in Mumbai. The 47-year-old tested positive for COVID-19 last week. He says his admission was precautionary and that he hopes to be back home in a few days. Several Indian cities, including Mumbai, have seen a steep rise in coronavirus cases in the past few weeks. China says it has administered more than 120 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines. Mass inoculation is speeding up in the world's most populous country, with daily jabs inching close to 7 million. China aims to vaccinate 40% of its residents by June. Foreign residents in Shanghai have been able to apply for COVID-19 jabs this week. The global financial hub has opened slots to over 200,000 expats to receive Chinese vaccines. Yang Chengxi has more.
Nick Parrish lives in Shanghai. On his personal to-do list this week is to register for COVID-19 vaccination through an official app called Health Cloud.
I'm scanning the QR code now that can be used by foreigners. It's taken me directly into the app and giving me some consent information and a consent form. Now I'm entering my full contact details. All of the instructions are in English.
Then he is able to choose from 33 clinics across 16 districts of Shanghai, like this one behind me, to receive his vaccination.
On April the 1st, a local non-governmental organization, the Shanghai Expatriate Center, helped a group of foreign residents get vaccinated.
We help a lot of expats, foreign passport holders, 40 of them, to get vaccinated today. Right, by helping them sign on to the app, right, make sure they are fully registered, make sure they got the right appointment, and then make sure they came to the right place and through the right procedure, and then that they got their first vaccination today.
I feel very good after the shots.
As one of the world's top financial centers, Shanghai attracts a huge number of expatriates. Official statistics show that there are some 215,000 foreigners working here, some with families in this city. They have been looking forward to this vaccination rollout to enable them to travel in and out of China.
You know, one of the big concerns is being able to travel, and so being able to have a vaccine that's here in China, being able to then exit China and be able to re-enter is a big hope.
I feel great because now I can feel that I can maybe travel back to my home country and to see my child who lives there.
After receiving their 2 required doses, they know they're another step closer towards normalcy in life. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Shanghai.
Student associations in France are calling on the government to set up a support fund worth nearly $2 billion for young people affected by the pandemic. President Emmanuel Macron has pledged to help the so-called lost generation of pupils who've had their schooling years hijacked by COVID-19. Ross Cullen reports from Paris.
Lunchtime at the local takeaway. People coming in for food and orders coming in by phone. But for students and school pupils, there's a special offer.
You're missing €1, but that's okay. I will cover it.
For those who can't afford their lunch, manager Brahim gives them it for free. He says everyone should do their bit to help the next generation.
We've been doing that for a while. We didn't wait for a student to commit suicide to help, but unfortunately some did, and that makes me really sad. We've been giving food to people in precarious situations before, and now students are part of that group.
Brahim's initiative is a specific example of wider support systems that have been put in place to help students.
Une conserve viande, une conserve légumes.
Here at one university in southeast Paris, food parcels are sorted with staple items like cereals, coffee, pasta and rice. Fresh bread, fruit and vegetables are also available for students from less advantaged areas.
Forcément, il y a plusieurs facteurs, il y a plusieurs raisons.
It's true that what we've seen here are students who have lost their jobs. The isolation, that's been especially tough. We had many of these problems already before COVID-19, but what's happened is the pandemic has made these issues worse. The number of students who are in need of support has gone up.
For many students, the structure provided by regular in-person classes has disappeared, with undergraduates living and studying at home.
Before we had our student life, but we also had a social life. We could go out and have fun. Now I feel like my life is only school. My bedroom became my classroom, dining room. Everything I do happens in that room.
What's complicated is online class. It's very hard to focus. We have a lot of distractions. I only wake up a few minutes before the class starts, which is nice. But sometimes I stay in bed. I'm there, in my room. I miss class and just lie in bed.
A university should be buzzing with activity, but the pandemic has not only impacted academic studies, societies and sports clubs, but the social interactions that should be the heart of campus life.
The university food banks are a start, but they only ease current problems. The future job market is also a major issue for students. Their part-time work has dried up, there's a freeze in the job market, and millions of workers already employed are on furlough.
We know that the economic environment is difficult. Our job is to see what we can do to support our students, our graduates, our alumni. Because even for those students who graduated 5 or 10 years ago, the economic situation is not booming. So we need to support our whole student community when it comes to employability.
1 year on from the first coronavirus lockdown in France, and another academic year affected by the pandemic. The government accepts the short-term disruption to physical classes, but it fears a long-lasting impact on students' mental health and job prospects. Ross Cullen, CGTN, Paris.
Meanwhile, around 93% of British people are educated at state-run schools. The remaining 7% who were educated privately make up a third of the intake at the UK's elite universities. They often get to go into top jobs in public life. Now, a new group calling itself the 93% Club is looking to challenge that. More at europe.cgtn.com.
More than 10 million people in China have autism. While they may have difficulties with language, behaviour or social skills, some prefer to express themselves through art. An annual exhibition in Beijing is now showcasing artistic creations by children with autism. Swen Ye reports.
Jackie has 2 of his paintings featured in this year's Autism Awareness Day art show. His paintings are about sunflowers and more sunflowers. He says they bring optimism. And his mother, Flora Tan, says painting and music trainings have come to bring calmness and concentration.
Artistic training is effective, but the effects come slowly. It takes time for him to find out what he likes.
For 25 years now, mother and son have been looking for ways for Jackie to cope with autism.
There's been sensory integration training, auditory and linguistic treatment, and so on. The training is lifelong, it lasts forever, and takes place wherever possible. We're lucky to be able to afford it all.
She says she hopes the pair will be lucky to stay with each other and grow in the years to come. By 2019, there are over 10 million people with autism in China. Among them, more than 2 million are under 14, and not every one of them gets the attention and training they need. China's leading expert in treating autism, Dr. Jia Meixiang, says the lack of attention is felt even more acutely for autistic people who are growing old.
Our oldest patient is 52 years old now. How much help do you expect the parents to be when their child is this old? That's why we've been calling for a lifelong, all-around support system for autistic children. It should be a system that combines medical, educational, and rehabilitation efforts.
She says more awareness is needed about autism in China because everyone grows old one day. CGTN, Beijing.
You're watching CGTN. Coming up, Let There Be Light. A massive exhibition illuminates the Chinese capital.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Mari, what would you say is a good question?
Stephen, I'd say it's one where there's always more than one answer.
The Answers Project is a new podcast series from CGTN Europe. With me, Stephen Cole.
And me, Mari Beveridge. In each episode, we'll take a complex question.
And with the help of some of the world's foremost experts, shine light on some of the answers. So join us for The Answers Project.
Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Well, it's been said that great ideas are thought up at the pub over a beer with friends. And that's exactly what happened to a group of scientists trying to tackle one of the world's greatest problems, water pollution. Drawing inspiration from a pint of lager, the so-called Great Bubble Barrier is cleaning up Amsterdam's waterways. Shini Samara reports.
Every minute, the equivalent of one full garbage truck of plastic trash is dumped in the sea. 80% of those plastics come directly from inland areas, washed into the sea by rivers and streams. Engineers in Australia and Amsterdam decided the problem was so bad there was only one thing to do: have a beer and find a solution.
I was studying environmental engineering, and we were visiting a wastewater treatment plant, and at some point they aerate the wastewater to jumpstart certain bacterial processes, and it was basically this big whirlpool of air bubbles, but the plastic was collecting in one corner. And that was the initial spark for me to kind of say, makes sense. Can't I use that in a more directed way? And then I found out that 3 young women from the Netherlands had been working basically on the exact same idea. And for them, it was actually in an evening at a bar that the bubbles in the beer were the spark for the idea to say maybe we can use air bubbles to catch plastic.
So bubbles in a beer glass inspired the imagination of Francis Zoet, Saskia Studer and Anne-Marika Evelins. And it was the bubbles used for oxygenating a wastewater plant that was the spark for Philip Airhorn.
The technology of a bubble curtain has been around since the 1930s, actually, and it has been used to stop saltwater intrusion and stopping oil spills.
After initial interest from the National Water Authority in the Netherlands, they were able to go into a lab to perfect the system.
We just took that basically existing technology and looked at how can we specifically apply it to plastics and then make sure we're energy efficient and non-intrusive for the ecology. And then we used those results to upscale to a large open water pilot. So that test showed that we could capture on average 86% of the test material.
This success led to the first operational bubble barrier being built in Amsterdam at the end of 2019.
What's actually happening with these bubbles?
If we have a glass of beer, of course, the bubbles are kind of like all over the place, forming randomly, and we do it a lot more directed. So we have a single line of air bubbles, and these arise from a tube. It's a perforated tube, and that tube we position diagonally in the river. So the effect is that the rising air bubbles create an upwards water stream. And this is taking up the plastic, which is suspended and under the water surface to the surface. And then together with the natural flow of the river, we'll push it then to the side and into the catchment system where we can retain and then remove the plastic trash.
Are there any implications for wildlife?
By using air bubbles, for us, the great thing is that we can allow fish and wildlife to still pass and use the river as it's intended to be, as well as ship traffic.
The success of this first bubble barrier shows how simple but innovative technology can stop plastic entering our seas and could be used in rivers around the world.
Our ambition is definitely to make steps towards Asia, specifically Southeast Asia, and then to hopefully deploy the system worldwide. But for now, Europe, and we're looking at 2022, 2023 to be hopefully launching our first system in Asia.
Face masks are mandatory in several states across Mexico, but enforcement has proved challenging. Enter the country's famed lucha libre wrestlers, who are taking matters into their own hands. Alistair Baverstock explains.
Walk down the street in Mexico City without a face mask and you might receive more than just dirty looks. You might find yourself in the middle of a wrestling show. With limited wrestling events since the pandemic began, Mexico's famous lucha libre fighters have adapted their unique talents to the streets and not necessarily being gentle about it.
We are here to remind people that the fight isn't over and not to let their guard down, to keep using masks and disinfectant.
Here in the capital's main wholesale market, which last year became an area of high infection, 12 wrestlers are making their rounds.
While these wrestlers here in Mexico City are doing their part, it's a nationwide movement, with professional lucha libre fighters from across the country taking to the streets of their hometowns to encourage their fellow citizens to observe pandemic protocols.
The Mexican public loves its luchadores, and they are cheered as they go around the market.
Mask wearing has been a complicated issue in Mexico. People seem to think they are invincible and that the virus won't affect them. So the wrestlers' activity is excellent. They are educating the public and everyone has fun at the same time.
Indeed, the wrestlers know it's their revered social status that lets them impose themselves upon a public that doesn't like being told what to do.
We can do this because as luchadores we're public figures. If a regular person here were to shout at someone to put their mask on, obviously people won't pay attention. But we arrive, put them in a chokehold and make them understand. That's the role we take on as public figures.
As Mexico remains one of the pandemic's worst-hit countries, these wrestlers hope their targets will keep wearing their virus-blocking sanitary masks even after they leave and their character masks come off. Alistair Baverstock, CGTN, Mexico City.
Don't mess with Lucha Libre. Now, the Beijing International Light Festival has switched on, featuring an illuminated and immersive high-tech exhibition. This year's theme is Blue Space. CGTN's Lin Lin took a tour.
An immersive experience available only at night. Nature's beauty is highlighted with a little help from technology. The Beijing International Light Festival is back for a second year.
The theme of our show this year is Blue Space. We've created a universe in which there's the blue planet. The visitors come in as explorers from Earth, they board the spacecraft, and it takes them to the blue planet. And the installations they see in the park are different bio-landscapes on planet Blue. There, they need to complete several tasks, which are the interactive installations we've set up. So the exhibition is immersive and interactive.
Set in Beijing's Yuyuantan Park, the 18,000 square meter venue is a popular site for enjoying cherry blossoms in spring. But as the sun goes down, a new experience awaits visitors. The whimsical night scene uses 19 different types of lighting equipment, including more than 12,000 point source lights and 2 kilometers of LED light bands.
This installation is called Awakening, and the concept is to use the warmth of our fingertips to thaw the glaciers on planet Blue, to nurture the growth of this mystical plant on the planet.
This is an interactive light installation which requires you to send a message to the stone, and these firefly-looking like creatures will respond to your message. Let's give it a try. Hello! The Rain Booth is another interactive installation that produces rain shower when one stands in the middle. The centerpiece in Blue Space is not to be missed. The triangular-shaped structure stands right in the middle of the park. It's built from LED screens and puts on a laser light show every 20 minutes. Many of the installations here reminds me of the enchanting jungle in Avatar. For example, this glowing tree right here is like the tree of life. So be it immersive, dazzling, however you want to describe the experience, a trip down here is certainly a night you won't forget. The Beijing International Light Festival will run until October 2021. Lin Lin, CGTN.
Just stunning. Well, finally, here's something to make you jump for joy and proof that good news really can make people leap in the air. Meet Turkish footballer Alparslan Öztürk. He's just finding out that he's been picked for the national squad for the first time. The 29-year-old has played top-flight football for years but never quite made it to international level. Unfortunately, he was only picked as a substitute for Tuesday's game and he never made it off the bench. But if he got to the pitch, he'd probably have been pretty good at heading the ball. Best of luck next time.
A reminder of our top stories on CGTN. A train crash has killed dozens of people in Taiwan. The express service came off the tracks inside a tunnel. UK opposition is growing against vaccine passports. Many MPs say it's dangerous and discriminatory. And Spain is set to trial a 4-day working week using EU funding for better work-life balance.
And that is Global Business Europe. Thank you so much for watching. More on all our stories at europe.cgtn.com and follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're available to watch on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV. You can also find us on YouTube and Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app. From all of the team here in London, goodbye and have a great weekend.